Hi, everyone. Thank you, thank you, Teresa, for this wonderful festival that you're doing and giving the space of the artists to get to know them and to engage with them. And I'm really excited to be here today with Sofia Clausse, this wonderful Argentinian artist that is currently studying at the Royal Academy of Arts in London, and that we will exhibit hopefully this year, finger crossed, depending on what's going on in the world, in London at the end of the year in our exhibition and a group of exhibition Traverse. So I'm going to start giving you the voice, Sofia, just to so you can tell us a bit more about yourself, a bit like a big highlight of your practice. We will be sharing you, and we were going to share with you some of the images of Sofia's work. So we're going to be like in a mixture of screen sharing and dialogue, and of course feel free to ask questions. So please, Sofia, just give us a brief outline of your work and how long have you started, and where did you study, and like a big highlight of your practice.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for everyone for being here. Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you so much, Daniela. And thanks to everybody that is here watching this today. So my name is Sofia Clausse, and I'm originally from Argentina. I did my university in the States where I studied graphic design, and then after graduating, that was in 2014, my undergraduate. Afterwards, I started expanding my practice into fine art, and currently I'm doing a master's in fine art at the Royal Academy of Arts. And yeah, so I don't know if you want to share the screen, but maybe I'll talk a little bit about my practice. Actually, my practice started mainly from looking at, it started from looking at typography, because I was studying design, especially concentrating on typography and letters and how letter forms are created. And something that I was like particularly interested in. I don't know if the screen will work.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna share it right now so you can see.
Oh yeah. Actually, yeah, so I have some of these tools with me. These are some tools that I've been making like over the years. So I have like this one. They're very like rudimentary. I have.
So show them. I'd rather them seeing them directly so they can see bigger the material.
Yeah, so actually maybe I'll just go back a little bit and explain a bit of like in typography, something that you usually do to like understand how letters are made is that you can put like two pencils together like this, which is like very like simple, and that's in order to imitate like a flat nib pen in calligraphy. And I love this idea that just by putting like two pencils, you create a gesture that immediately responds to your movement of the body, that changes the angle. So then I started like expanding this idea, and I like to exaggerate it. I made this little thing. And then actually what happened with this, I was like studying these tools that I was making. And what happens is that once you make something bigger and you have to hold it in like this kind of way with like your whole hand, but also like you can't draw like on a table. So then I would move to the floor, and then you have to make bigger gestures, and then your body becomes another limitation to the tool. So for example, you have like like this kind of like angle that your arm in particular can make because of this kind of thing. So you can make this kind of curve, but then you can't really do this kind of curve. So then I was particularly interested in how this three things about like your body, the tool, and the limitations of the tool can create a specific type of gesture. And yeah, so then I was making, this is one that was 3D printed, and the way that this works is like, you've got this, got this thing here, which you can, it's more like a holder of tools, like a meta tool. And you can attach these different things, like either space them out or like have one in like a different size. And then with that one, you could like attach things like, like brushes or like bigger markers. Actually, maybe it might be a good idea to share the image and to show, I've got that one also in the middle. That one I don't have with me because it's at a show right now. And then this, it's at a show in yeah. And then this next one here, that shows more like the tool in action. And then it shows a little bit of also like this on the top top right corner. It's a book that was particularly interesting to me, which is The Theory of the Stroke. And in that one, it was showing how like with the tool you can start to create different. You can understand how a stroke was made depending on the tool and the movement. And I was really interested in that very subtle thing. And then at the bottom, you can see this idea of like, again, like using the double line and how that creates different gestures. So then I was doing a lot of this kind of like repetitive mark making in order to understand what tool I created and how that tool responds to me. And then I was also doing a lot of like repetitive notions of like writing a letter again and again and again and again. And then something that happens with that is that you end up with almost like a muscle memory in your body of like a specific movement, which is a movement of a letter, like a lowercase a, which has a specific type of curve, a specific type of straight line. And I was making paintings. Yeah, actually, if you can show that one. So that's a good example actually of a painting made with this tool, in which I was studying the tool and studying this kind of like muscle memory movement, and also the limitations of the tool and the limitations of my body and the limitations of the structure of the specific type of the paper. So it's also like studying a lot of these like hidden structures.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that interests me the most about your work is precisely this tension between the body and the production of language and culture, because we tend to assimilate language as something man-made, as produced and created by culture, whereas our bodies are natural of some sort. But this tension clashes, and how I like how your work is individualized, not just by your own expressions and your own bodies and your own gestures that is transforming and creating a language, but also how it's an individual to your own utensils and to your own personal materials that you're developing and you're tailor making. And so you're creating these special patterns that no one else can make, because you made that material, you made that machine that allowed this movement to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was interested in, because I think that if you like in the way that if you create your own tools, you can create your own gestures, and you can create your own way of mark making that is very specific to you.
Absolutely. I'm going to exactly.
And and then that's so actually then afterwards, kind of like where my practice went is I decided to actually, because I had moved away from this idea of the letters, and I decided to actually go back and bring that into the work again. So I was making these shapes that were repetitive and loops. So I was thinking, how can I bring text back into this using this kind of form that I've created? So then I thought, if these shapes that I'm making are like loops, how can text loop? So I started writing these infinite sentences that have no beginning and no end. So in this painting, for example, like if you read it from the bottom, it says, start anywhere, go everywhere at the speed of time and time again. I am back to the start. It's anywhere, go everywhere. So it's this thing about like you can read it from the top corner, you can read it from the bottom, and it has like different meanings however you read it, or it's like a never ending sentence, because I love this idea of like repetition and cycles.
It's really interesting how precisely your work, I feel it fits in many different art tendencies and trends that have occurred throughout Latin America, in Argentina, different literary movements that are creating the same gesture, but also in Brazil with concrete poesy that then led to the concrete art movement, and this understanding of language as a form. So instead of focusing on just the content that we're reading, your content is also creating certain shapes and creating like a web that is transforming how we understand language, not just as a way to convey a certain communication or just to convey a certain meaning, but rather as a visual form. Is there any way like this concrete artists and these poets inspire you somehow and in your understanding of art and language?
Yeah, like for me, concrete poetry was always like a big thing that I was looking at, especially it was such an important movement in South America, and I love this idea that with concrete poetry, like you can create a visual system using letters in a more visual way, and then that visual thing is also language, so that like the way that you organize language visually is also like another way of communication. So yeah, it's always like something that was like always something that I always thought about, and I always thought like, what is my own version of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how this we were discussing this the other day, that we were having this conversation about this tension between textiles and language, and precisely, and there's a word in Spanish but it's untranslatable. Well, I don't know if someone here in the public would allow us to translate this, but it's called trama. And precisely, trama is something that you can find in a fabric, that la trama, the fabric. I don't know, how would you translate it, Tere? I don't know if you would know. And then it also means plot, like the trama, like the plot of a written text. So this visual understanding of language, it's very beautiful how you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, and I'm like, the more that I look into it, like the more that, because it's interesting that in Spanish we have this of trama and trama, but also in English with like text and textiles, and it's actually something that in a lot of cultures there's that kind of like duality between textiles and language. So it's super interesting that it might happen in both languages. So that's a painting that I wrote in this, that I made in, like, I started with a sentence that I wrote and I cut up together. Actually, I think I have some pictures of like how the process was like. It was like a very like physical, just like putting words on the floor, cutting them, putting them together, seeing what comes up, moving them around until I end up with a sentence that makes sense. And with this sentence in particular, so the final sentence was to the moon, to spiral bound. And this is when I started thinking, okay, like, because I was doing a lot of these infinite sentences, but then I thought, what if they're not in this loop? Like, how can I make a sentence that it's not like an infinite sentence, but how can I still retain something of that? And in this painting, that's when I have these two shapes on the side, these like sun-like shapes. That's something that happened in the process of trying to make the letter O. Mm-hmm. And when I was trying to make the letter O with like this kind of tool by zigzagging it, something that happened is that like I ended up with that shape of the sun. Actually, I have all these suns behind me. And I love this idea that by trying to create a letter and trying to do like a full circle and also like in zigzag, which was like a back and forth type of way, I ended up with this thing that looked like a sun. And for me, that was such a symbol of repetition and cycles. So I put it on the sides of the paintings also, almost as a way of maintaining that repetition, because potentially I could make more paintings and tile them, so that they become like an infinite series that all connect.
Absolutely. And I feel it's very beautiful because you change the way we relate with language. Language is not longer used as a way of communicating to each other, but it's a visual ground, it's a visual world that enters into our visual culture in a similar way to many different women Latin American artists like you, like Mira Chendel in Brazil as well, and Mirta de Misaje. I don't know if you it's another Argentinian. It's a very beautiful work. Mirta de Misaje made a series of drawings in a way where she would write illegible text, and the idea is for you to engage with this illegible marks, but that gives you the feeling that you're reading, but you're not, in a way, because you're trying to break away with this illegible tension that at the end also becomes very socially engaging, because she was developing this illegible text in a time with during the dictatorship in Argentina, where there was a lot of censorship. So this visual like revolution saying, you cannot read me because I don't want you to read me, but also because you're not allowing me to be read. So it's this wonderful way of how images can transfer such a very big symbols and
Yeah,
knowledge.
I love that. Also like Cecilia Vicuña, she had this exhibition that was called Palabra Armas. It was like palabra and armas, like words and weapons. Almost like your word is powerful. Like using your words, you can, you know, like you. She was a big activist, and she was using words and her art as a way of like being like activist and being powerful and speaking out. So yeah, there's definitely like that really important connection. And then. Yeah, and then so then with with the sons, this really funny thing happened also when I was making this painting with these sons. I found that image on the bottom. I just found it in a book. I think I was trying to Google something like the way that orbits move in space, because that was the idea of like moving in a spiral, like that orbits moved in a spiral. And then I found that image, it was like tiny like that, and I was so amazed because the sun in there looks just like my sun. And then also there's this spiral bound kind of shape, like this trail left over. So I don't know, that was one of these like weird and magic moments. And then I decided to put all of these suns together, since they were a symbol of repetition and ongoing and cycles. And I made them into a book that I think I also have I think I will send you a picture of the book. And they're bound in a spiral. Oh yeah, no, it was that one.
And this one.
Yeah, so that's the book. So it's like it has no cover. It has no beginning and no end, and you can just like keep flipping it and keep coming up with like different combinations of the book,
of the sun, of the infinite sun that you're creating.
Again, it could be almost like a calendar, like those calendars.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that we're arriving to this one beautiful work that you developed, that also makes me think of this concept of glitch, precisely because of the exhibition that we will develop together and where your work will be exhibited is part of this research that we're developing of how the digital is affecting the way we understand our bodies and nature, right? And it is a coincidence that we are right now living in, because of the coronavirus and because of all the situation, that now the only way we can communicate is during this digital perspective. But at the same time, I feel like the digital has created a new visual culture that, despite the fact, I wanted to ask you whether or not this was intentional, these glitches that you were creating, or it wasn't, and it ended happening just because our minds are driven by this new visual world in a way.
It's fun. I guess because I do get a lot of, when I was making like this particular painting, which I made, which I don't like. I don't think I have it anymore. Oh no, not that one, the one on the previous page. That one's fine. This one. Actually, this one. And I'll try to like go back to your question of the glitch and this kind of thing. Actually, what I was doing with this painting, again, starting with this text that I wrote on the side, and I was looking and I was interested in this idea of time, of looking at time and different different ways of looking at time. So like time as like a fragment and time as a constant. So the fragmented time was the every time, and the constant time was the every when. So I was interested in like layering these two things of like every time and everyone. But I was trying to layer them with in writing, and then the reason I don't like this painting is that I just did it almost like too obvious just with the painting. Like I just put you can see in the bottom, like I put the W on top of the T and the I, when actually the text was fine for me. So then actually, yeah, what did happen with this is that you end up with this kind of like this difficult way of reading things. So yeah, something that is almost like a glitch, even though like and people were telling me, oh, it looks like a glitch, maybe also because it's black and with these like straight, like almost like pixelated things. So in a way it did function as a glitch, as like an error, like something that I didn't intend.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I love this connection actually between the digital and the analog, and how those two things connect and retract.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I was thinking, because the work that you do is very manual, despite the fact that like you come from this design background that back in, for example, in the time Luis Kamnitzer was studying, probably he would have used very mechanical tools for graphic design, like screen prints and things like that. Whereas now everything is mechanized, and we have so many different tools like Illustrator, Photoshop, that designers use, that in a way alienates a bit like the gestures, whereas you're producing very digital effects in a very analog way. And how has this worked for you, and these different tools, digital tools? Have you ever used them, or would you rather stay with this very bodily encounter with painting?
Well, I think actually maybe my whole artistic practice more started as a way of getting away from the digital and trying to make something with my hands. And also the idea of doing the tools was also as a way of rebelling against these, like going against these digital tools that most of the time end up with looking the same. Like you can tell when something is made with a specific type of digital tool. It has a specific type of vectorized line. So it was both like a way of trying to move away from that, using something with your body to create a gesture that is specific to yourself. And also because when you make your own tools and your own systems, your own ways of working, you create something that is quite specific. And it is funny that it kind of went around to become almost like a digital thing, because this is something that happens in my practice a lot. Like I make something and then I'm almost like stuck in this loop. Like I'm always like stuck in this kind of, it just kind of comes around again. And yeah, actually the next picture of that one, this one, this was one that said, and on the background it says "touch the plants," and then on the front, it's the thing on white is also words that I was abstracting. So almost like in the same way that you were explaining of like Mirta's work, I was tracing the outline of a word to almost create like a solid, like a block of text. And actually what you see there in the white is the paper.
Oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, and that was
so
the last thing that I painted. Yeah, so actually that, so there's this back and forth thing also, because it was almost like masking the paper, masking it away.
It looks beautiful because it looks layered, as if the white is the last thing that you did, like you purposely painted on top.
Yeah. There's always this kind of like back and forth, like thing going, this kind of like tension between the foreground and the background.
Definitely. Let's talk about this painting, because it's really interesting that you say that it says touching the plants.
Touch the plants, yeah.
As if like what we're experiencing now, like this connection with the natural world in a very glitchy, digital, disturbing way that we cannot reach because we have to observe it from the distance.
Yeah.
I find it very, very interesting how precisely, we are all so much immersed in the digital that it creates this visual culture that we cannot run away from. But at the same time, what interests me the most is that nowadays I feel like art has been pretty much affected by the digital, and especially now with artificial intelligence, and how can we distinguish ourselves from the machines. And I feel one of the ways that we can actually distinguish ourselves from the machine is through the error and the mistake, this concept of the glitch, and how human beings, we have uh, in a way certain monstrosities or certain abnormalities that allows us not to be perfect every time, that makes us less machine-like. I don't know what you feel.
Yeah, I love that. Also, like I was reading this text also, which quite relates to what you're saying, of this like Japanese wabi-sabi, and when they would break the pots and glue them back together to, and like fill the cracks with gold, with the idea that in those mistakes, you can, and then also kind of like similar to language, because when you see like a pot broken, you can imagine it in your head how it was when it was perfect, because perfection is something that doesn't exist, right? It's only in your head. So it's only in your mind that you can imagine it, this like perfection thing, almost like this television written of Luis, like he writes television and then you imagine it, or you hear a word and it's in your head. So I love this, actually, this combination of those two things, of how like you, if through making a mistake, maybe you can imagine it in another form, but also embracing the mistakes and embracing the things that don't make something perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like you have more.
That was just showing some of the process, and then
these are the words that you
actually this one is because I was then trying to think. So again, this back and forth is kind of like always going back and forth with the practice. Then I thought, okay, if I started with a word, then I made into a solid like fill shape. How do I actually make it now into like solid 3-dimensional tactile word? Like, how do I make a word into an object? And so then I made these words out of clay. So from the outline of a word, I made them with clay and put them put them on the wall. I think I have one more. I think I might have seen one more picture of the.
But it's really interesting because, again, even if there are cutouts, it looks like a computer word, like a very mechanical digital world that you're transforming back into an object, and something that was a representation of something becomes the presentation, becomes the object itself, which I find very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just like a symbol that allows us to imagine something in our heads, but you're giving us another imagination, some sort, like the word transform itself, so it's no longer there to mean something, but it's there to present itself as an object, or as a entity itself, which is very beautiful.
This one was also a bit of a weird, crazy story, because I was back to that painting that I was thinking of, the every when and the every time. I decided, okay, the painting, it doesn't work as a layer text because it gives me a glitch. So then I thought, I was getting interested in these magical symbols like sigils. And sigils are a symbol that you can create with words and with a sentence of intention. So the way that you create it is almost the way that you would also create like a logo. Sometimes you just put all the letters together.
Like a puzzle?
And then I ended up with the shape. So you can see that there's a W on the top, there's the M at the bottom, and this was when time.
Oh, I see it.
There's the E and the H, which is also an I, and I ended up with that by putting them together. And it was actually quite crazy, because I also, by coincidence, it ended up looking like 2 hourglasses next to each other. And the whole idea was thinking about time in 2 different ways. And then I ended up with 2 hourglasses.
And so
that was
explain to us a bit, like this research that you did, these 2 words, everyone, because those are 2 words that you created yourself, right? Everyone.
The every
Because
time,
every time
yeah,
exists,
the
but
everyone,
everyone.
yeah, the everyone was just something that I used when I was cutting the words together, and like putting them, editing them out with paper, almost like a collage. And I quite liked it, because then it felt to me like a word that means constant time. The everyone.
Everyone, like the forever, sort of, or they
For
can.
I guess the forever is more of something in the constant future, where the everyone, I think of the everyone as the now and the constant now.
The constant present. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes.
That's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And so you created this puzzles that then you turn into a sculpture as well.
Yeah, because then again, I was interested in this idea of like translating across materials. If this is a word, if I can call this a sentence maybe, or a word, how else can it behave? So then I printed it out to make it big. So then in the middle, I printed it out into like A4 pieces of paper to try to scale it up, to see again, like to see what it does when you go from like small to big.
Yeah.
And then this thing happened that I just put it on the wall, and it also functioned as a way of like tiling them up over time. And then I cut it also with fabric, and it had a back and forth, which is something that I'm also interested in, like we saw in those previous pieces, like showing both foreground and background simultaneously, and how it can move. So these were explorations as to like
yeah,
what else
absolutely.
can
Like
I
it allows you to see the past and the future at the
yeah.
same simultaneously. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So this is like this is installed in the wall.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. And those were just some things that also I thought about, like from when we were talking earlier, like I just wanted to include some things like that I'm always like researching and thinking about in terms of text and textiles and time and repetition and cycles and words, and also like my practice being almost like a cycle in a labyrinth. And there's also this that Greek myth of the labyrinth that gets solved using a thread.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also like all these knots and like threads being a way of like that calendar on the black image, being a way of like of calculating time, or also thread being a game like those cat's cradle, but which also forms constantly transforming shapes. So it's like this big thing of
Web.
yeah.
Absolutely. Of time and space and language. It's
Yeah,
so
that's sort of
exactly that leads us a bit to this particular painting that is the one that we're going to exhibit, that precisely is called time
years and years and years
I
and
know, yeah, I'm sorry, years and years and years, yeah. I knew it was related to time. So.
It was something like that.
Yeah, something with time. Years. Why years? No, I'm just kidding. So this is the process. I'm really interested in precisely to see like the process that you build your particular paintings and how you layer them out and you construct them as a fabric as well, right? Like as a weaving, constructing the plot, la trama of the painting, right?
Yeah, I love that, the drama. So I wanted to show a bit of like the process, and it's in that painting it's mainly about this tension between these two things. So it's the tension and the behavior, and how two bodies behave with each other, and how they what's that tension like, how one informs the other. So I started by painting the white lines with that big tool, and then
Which has its own limitation that you cannot give three like
yeah,
because
and
your
the
arm
limitations are also mainly in the size, because once I start with that specific size, and it can only go so far up until it has to turn, and until it meets another line, and then it has to turn again, but it can only like turn a certain way. So like the structure and the proportion of the canvas is a very specific limitation in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that somehow your paintings are also performance, that at the end of the day this is the result of your own performance of moving around the canvas?
I mean, I haven't thought of it too much like that, because I think a lot in terms of the process. The process for me is very important. There's definitely like this connection between the calligraphy and the choreography, which I really like.
Beautiful, like a dance. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful relationship. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So so you actually glue them together, like the different parts of the painting.
Yeah. So then I cut up these strips of which are paper, and these yellow strips were also made with a different tool that makes smaller parallel lines. That is more like this like sponge type of marker that I cut up. I might have it here with me actually. It's like I think I have, yeah. So it's this like big marker, but I got the sponge and I cut it into like a zigzag so that it can make those type of parallel lines. And with that I made quite random shapes on a piece of painted yellow paper, and I cut them up, and I call them laundry when I hang them like that to dry. Or sometimes they can also be words, because sometimes they could be letters. And it's also like a way, it's also quite related to this way of writing by cutting and mixing to them, trying to fit them, and also a form of weaving, because they have to go in and under a shape, and they have to, it all has to fit and loop, and it also has to behave with the white and with the yellow, almost like the two objects.
Like a poem. Yeah. This is the final piece. It's a beautiful, beautiful painting that we hopefully will exhibit this year. Thank you, Tere, for giving us the space, and Flawa for giving us the space to broadcast and make women artists from Latin America make their work known across the world and around the world. Thank you so much. Thank you again to the Arts Council, the Instituto Cervantes, the Embassy, and thank you for all the support that you're allowing us to show this wonderful artist that I'm really, really proud of showing in London. And thank you, Sofia, again, for your wonderful work and words and wisdom. Thank you again.